joyful hello to all of you. My name is Minnku Buttar, founder of the Circle of Joy that brings you self-mastery programs and retreats. It gives me great joy to bring to you this season's talk show, a series of interviews on choosing joy, secrets, and stories from all over the world. It is my diligent attempt to show you that joy is not a hockey-pocky, frivolous concept, but a discipline, a way of life much needed. If you want to be resilient, radiant, and unstoppable like a runaway train. So subscribe to my channel so that you can tap into the wisdom of people from all over the world. I will see you there.
Hello to all you lovely souls in different parts of the world. A brutal truth of life is that struggles and chaos can be part of daily existence, and you just have to accept them. You accept it with grace, with serenity, with resilience, because they have their own gifts too. But here's the thing. These problems are not the problem. Coping is the problem. So the conversation today is about how can we stand right up when life knocks you down? Namaste. My name is Minnku Buttar, your host from India, and I am delighted to welcome you all back to the 21st episode of this talk show. And if you want to catch the secrets and stories of my amazing speakers on the 1st and 15th of each month, all you have to do is like, subscribe, and press that cute bell icon on my YouTube channel, and the regular updates land right into your inboxes. So where do I even start to share a little about my guest speaker today? Because there is so much to share. She possesses a reservoir of charming aura, of very uncommon wisdom, sound judgment, prudence, and a practical sense that comes from a variety of life experiences and adventures from Amazonian jungles to the greatest cities on earth. Now, 2 decades of career in newsrooms and as a field reporter, she came to recognize that people whose lives are shattered by disaster would need long-term support. And how vital is that? So 2 doctorates later, achieved, mind you, through independent study. In 1991, she opened her practice in Greenwich Village and ran much needed support programs. One was for teenagers whose fathers were killed in the 9/11 World Trade Center attacks, bless you. Another long-term program for Hurricane Sandy survivors, followed by workshops for teachers in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. Now, she is also the author of 7 books, including the 4-time bestseller, Sixth Sense, Unlocking Your Ultimate Mind Power. But it's her latest book, The 5 Gifts, Discovering Hope, Healing, and Strength When Disaster Strikes, that I promise we will dive into the wisdom today. Now, today, she's on the front lines of disaster, mental health, and my very special guest speaker provides psychological first aid trainings to first responders and nurses who are dealing with burnout and PTSD issues. So yes, my dears, her altruistic ambitions do make this world a better place. Please join me to welcome all the way from United States, Dr. Laurie Nadel. Welcome, Laurie.
Thank you so much, because that is a lovely introduction. I appreciate your taking the time to talk about my book and my work. Thank you so much.
You are so, so welcome, Dr. Laurie. Now, you've been on Oprah's show, am I right?
Yes.
And now you're here with me. So let me just tell you, it's such an honor to be able to share your wealth of knowledge and skill with our audience. So once again, thank you and warm welcome.
Thank you.
Let's start from where it all began. I just want our audience to know you, and of course, I'll bring it up to the beautiful offering you have to this universe and the world. So, from what I understand, your evolutionary journey started post 2011 hurricane, and please jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd like to take a moment to set the scenario for the benefit of our wonderful listeners. You had, Dr. Laurie, you had a 4.5-foot sheet of water about 200 yards west of your house. Your furniture was floating. You had bathroom pipes burst. You had basically a Titanic in your home, and
Yes,
right? Is that right?
that's right. It's
Ah,
absolutely right.
yeah, and you
It
saw.
was
Please tell us
it
a
was
little bit more.
extraordinary. Yeah,
Mhm, mhm,
it was really it was Hurricane Sandy.
mhm,
Sometimes it's called Superstorm Sandy,
mhm,
which actually impacted more than 1 million people and 1,000 miles of coastline in the
mhm,
northeastern United States.
mhm,
And I had a beach cottage where I'd raised my daughter for many years, and we had never flooded. I think we had, I guess, lived through, I think, usually about one hurricane a year, but
mhm,
it never had anything like that. And but the year before, there had been a hurricane that was Hurricane Irene, I believe it was,
mhm,
that had flooded some of the houses that were closer to the seawall.
mhm,
Excuse me, I lived on a channel. It's called the Intracoastal Waterway
mhm,
that goes from Florida up to Maine, and I lived about I guess 70 or 80 meters
mhm.
from the channel. And but it had never flooded as far as where my home was at my end of the street.
Right.
And that there was water that was 4 feet high, that from every window you could see the entire island was flooded because the ocean met the channel. I mean, the
Mhm,
waters just
mhm,
came in
mhm,
from
mhm.
both sides, kind of like a tsunami,
Right.
and flooded everything.
Mm.
And the town, the storm surge wiped out the town's sewage sewage
Mhm,
facility.
mhm.
And so when the tide went out, excuse me, and it cleared all the water out, it left raw sewage, and everything on the
Oh,
island was contaminated, and
goodness.
the water supply was
Mm,
contaminated for quite a while.
mm,
So we had no communication, so we didn't know. Nobody really tells you what to do in the event of a disaster like that. And I always say to people that the most horrifying moment, is not when the water comes in, or even the fire itself, but
mm.
it's excuse me, watching the ruins
Yeah.
the next day, of
Yeah.
seeing everything that you've built in your
Correct.
life with all
Mm,
of your work and your saving and your investments, and all of the time and all the love that you put into creating your
mm.
home or your business. And when you see everything in ruins the next
Yeah.
day, it
Mm,
is one of the most shocking experiences,
mm.
shocking moments of your human journey.
Yeah.
So it does
Yeah.
take several
Mm,
years to
mm,
recover emotionally from a disaster. And that's something, especially in the United States, where
mhm.
people expect instant gratification.
Right.
So people
Right.
think, well, I'm going to,
Yeah.
I'll rebuild this. And then, people say, I will move on,
Mm.
expecting that things will go back to the way they were.
And they never do.
But
Mm,
and I always tell people that we can never go back,
mm,
we can only go forward. And we go forward
mm,
by the word that we use clinically is we metabolize, which is a kind of digesting
mm.
the undigestible, and
Yeah.
that takes quite a while
Mm,
for the psyche to completely adjust
mm.
to something that was so horrendous
Right.
that it fills us with a sense of horror and helplessness.
Mm.
And it takes a while to really kind of digest that and break it down, so
Yeah.
that we can metabolize it, and then it gives us that resilience that you
That,
spoke about so
yes.
beautifully, that
Yeah.
allows us to go forward into the
Mm,
future,
mm.
knowing that we have been able to grow as a result of that disaster, or that life
Mm, mm.
shattering event.
Yeah. Oh my God, Dr. Laurie, as you spoke, I mean, such emotional upheaval For just a few more minutes, I'm sure you've healed, and it takes time, but you go through that with grace and serenity that I talked about. But something caught my eye when I was reading, the beautiful book that you sent to me, a PDF version. Yet it seemed that amidst this disastrous emotional upheaval, Dr. Laurie, you felt an unmistakable spiritual presence was in charge, and so much so that I think you perceived this as a transformational opportunity to fully experience what it means to let go and let God in. So tell us a little bit, if I can, take you back to that moment. What was happening and where was the strength and calm coming from? Can you tap into it today for us?
Well, that's very, very interesting that you asked that question, because I don't know where these I don't know. I mean, I'm not somebody who is comfortable saying that God spoke to me, but clearly there was a higher spiritual presence and intelligence, a being, a consciousness that pervades us, pervades the universe. And I had a great fortune of spending part of every year for 10 years in South America, meeting with shamans and traditional healers. And the healers from many different countries, excuse me, from the Amazon and from the suburbs of Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, very, I would say, kind of the forgotten corners of South America, which is in North America, it's kind of a forgotten continent. Yes. And from the forgotten corners, I learned from everyone I spoke to who was any kind of a healer, or even people who are just living their daily, mundane, everyday lives. And people believed that God or spirit, or the Great Spirit, or what they call in the Amazon, Ayutam, the great force of life, that it speaks to us through nature. And so a cataclysmic natural event, like a hurricane in my case, or a blizzard, or, in Australia, the terrible wildfires, or the monsoons that you have, that what they say in the southern hemisphere of this, the southern continent of the Western Hemisphere, they say that all of nature speaks, and that because we in the industrialized world have been neglecting to listen to the voice of what they call Pachamama, the soul of the earth, or Yemanja, the soul of the sea. We don't listen, and so she is getting angrier and angrier, and she will get louder and louder. And over the years that I had been living on this barrier island and raising my daughter, I had started to notice that when there was high tide, we have an estuary that's I think about 75 miles long. What is that, about 130 kilometers?
And where is this, Dr. Laurie?
It's on the southern shore of Long Island, and it goes from east to west. And it's a lot of it is a wildlife sanctuary, and many kind of marsh birds, and a lot of turtles, and rabbits, and other kind of wildlife. In the winter, we get a lot of seals migrating from New England. It's very beautiful and very stark. But what I started to notice was that the high tide would always cover the marsh, so that it became like a lake. And that had started about, I started to notice that about 6 years before the storm. Which is definitely, visually I could see that, yes, the sea levels were rising. And of course, living at sea level on a little strip of, basically a sandbar that had been filled in to allow humans to build homes. This modest, island at the time. And so I was aware that the sea levels were rising, and that nature was speaking and that the mother of the sea was speaking to us.
Right.
And so I felt the night of the storm
Mm.
that she was definitely present. So I've always felt my soul has always felt very close to the sea and to the mother of the sea. And my teacher in Brazil was somebody who always spoke of the connection through the soul of the mother of the sea. And I felt that she was definitely present. And, I was physically safe, and my partner was physically safe, and our cat, we saved our cat who could have drowned. And so I felt that there was a message that was coming to me, that I would carry the magic and safety of my home wherever I went, but that the physical home was not my home anymore. And it was true that even though I was able to have the home rebuilt, the essence of the home was gone. I mean, it was an older house. It had a lot of charm. It was very eccentric. And when the house was rebuilt, is like all of those quirky details and the stained glass and all of the things that made it unusual, that was all gone. And it was lovely for what it was, but it belonged to the next, family that was going to come in with their young children. And I was guided to another place.
That is beautiful. That's so beautiful. And I had a smile on my lips as you spoke about South America and the shamans, and that is my wish list. And I do aspire one day, and in fact, I'm putting this intention out in the universe to go and spend a lot of time, in South America, connecting with ancient wisdom. Because I feel part of my soul and part of my tribe lives there. And so I've been guided as well. So thank you for that reminder that I need to just fuel this wish list of mine further. And I will definitely, Dr. Laurie, be getting in touch with you for guidance on where to go. Yes, but I'm totally tapping into your strength and calm, and I'm with you when you say that these messages, you get signs from the universe of an oncoming happiness, oncoming tragedy. It's just that we are wired in such a way that it's really hard. And Dr. Laurie, sometimes I wish that circumstances and pain didn't make us hard, bitter, and cynical. But having said that, it's the reality is different from anything else, because we humans, post a disaster or a traumatic experience or a shock, can go into rage, and we deplete our emotional tanks, right? So, and you have beautifully written in your book, and it popped up for me. You said that your coping mechanism tries to escape, forget, and bury the incident, the traumas. And so beautifully you've captured that looking away actually makes it harder to cope. So today, Dr. Laurie, what would you like to share? What tools from your beautiful book, The 5 Gifts, Discovering Hope, Healing, and Strength, what can help our audience to heal compassionately and not go into bitterness and cynicism?
I think that's a beautiful question. And I can tell you, I mean, here in the United States, it's there's really very little support for people. I mean, if you have your own private insurance, which I did, fortunately, and the insurance was excellent, but many people do not, when they try to collect the insurance, they find that they don't get the compensation that they expected. And a lot of people lose their homes because they can't afford to continue to pay for the mortgage because their businesses get wiped out. I mean, there's a financial catastrophe attached to almost every natural disaster here. in this country, and it's a very long and perilous journey, and it's very easy to become cynical because of the constant obstacles and fighting that you have to do in order to survive. And so it was during a period where I was literally on the telephone for hours every day, trying to collect the funds that were available but weren't being released to me. And I was just fraught because there were so many people or institutions. Someone will say one thing and then they change their story, and then they withhold the funds, and then they accuse you of not having complied with by providing documents, and that's actually a form of harassment.
Yes,
that got written up in the local newspaper.
Right.
So it happens to everybody who goes through a natural disaster here, probably everywhere.
Yeah.
And so I sat down to meditate. One day I asked myself if I was advising somebody, if somebody came into my office and had the kind of crisis that I was dealing with, what would I say, as a counselor or a coach or a therapist? And I realized that I would tell the person to stop for 48 hours and to not take any phone calls, faxes, emails related to this matter, and to just focus on relaxing and getting calm.
Right.
And go take a walk and meditate and sleep, and just really focus on unwinding the stress and get very quiet. And so after I think a day of just, relaxing, I sat down to meditate. And my question to my higher self, I said, or to spirit, was, is this going to be my life for the rest of my life? I mean, is this the rest of my life going to be a constant crisis and constant confrontation, kind of out there in the jungle with, like with a knife in my teeth, kind of hacking away at bureaucracy forever. And I heard an inner voice, which I believe is, the voice of spirit.
Yes.
Certainly a voice that has more wisdom than I do.
Yes, I hear you. I hear you.
And that voice whispered 5 words to me, which were humility, patience, empathy, forgiveness, and growth. And I was told, write these words down. These are 5 gifts that will help you to get through this and any other difficulty or tragedy. And please share these gifts with people.
That's
incredible. So I wrote them down.
Wow.
These are the 5 gifts that became the book, The 5 Gifts. It's humility, which is really the gift of it's kind of shedding the ego and recognizing that in any life journey, there are tragedies and there are hardships and there are difficulties, and no one is exempt. And that, what happened to me happened to 1 million people at the time. And it happens to millions of people every year. I mean, you just went through something yourself with storm and loss of power.
Yes, knocked me right down. Yes.
And, we don't recognize, when these things happen, that it could happen to anyone. And I'd like to mention, many millions of people around the world are living with long COVID.
Yes.
And, these are a constellation of symptoms. Many of them are neurological symptoms, brain fog, nerve pain, difficulty concentrating, fatigue, insomnia, fatigue being, extremely difficult way, it's going on for many people.
Yeah, it's still lingering. Yeah.
Some people have been sick since the beginning of the first wave of COVID. And it's very, very difficult to have been an active and a proactive and a productive person, you go from being somebody who does everything to somebody who can do like nothing or next to nothing. And it can be demoralizing. And humility, of course, is the gift of understanding that although we had no way of anticipating this, that this could happen. Could happen to anybody. What happened to me could happen to you.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
and that's a very difficult one to people who believe that you can get whatever you want by visualizing, that life is about, that if you don't get what you want, it's because you haven't visualized properly and you haven't manifested, and that somehow this is your fault. And humility takes all of that away. The gift of humility, gives you the grace to say, things happen to people. There are losses that we cannot explain, and it's inexplicable and mysterious, and it's kind of like the roll of the dice of life that can happen to any of us. And the gift of humility just allows us to kind of take it in and let it kind of roll through like a wave in the ocean.
Beautiful.
With thanks to the mother of the sea, that we learn so much from nature, the humility of nature, that things come and go and pass in their own time. And the second gift, which brings me to patience. And, I'm very impatient. I'm American. I want everything over yesterday.
Don't worry. It's all parts of the world. You find this
right?
all parts of the world.
I think Microsoft did a survey, and they found that around the world, I think they surveyed 2 million people, and they found that if it takes more than 2 seconds to download something, people get impatient.
Can you imagine what it's come to? And mindfulness has flown out of the window, Dr. Laurie.
Right. Yes, it's very, technology, excuse me, and cell phones, digital access to information so quickly have made it very, very impatient. And then we have, so patience, lets us understand that we may be suffering grief or heartache longer than we thought we should. And very often, people around us, people that we trusted and people that we care about may say, oh, why aren't you over it yet? You should be over it. And
who's to decide, right? Who's to decide?
Right.
The wearer of the shoe knows where it pinches, right?
Exactly. And the heart heals in its own time and its own way. And it doesn't have, it has its own logic, and it doesn't have a timetable. And, some people recover emotionally more quickly. And, when in the 5 gifts, I talk about how different cultures, deal with painful events. And I look specifically at the culture of first responders who deal with, death and loss every day. And they have certain skill sets that they use to kind of reframe some of the really gruesome experiences that they have every day on the job.
And go to bed, Dr. Laurie, don't you think? And go to bed with that impression.
That's right.
And it takes another set of resilience, detachment, I would say, to detach from that, what they could imbibe and absorb. So their shielding comes into place, right?
Right. Well, they learn how to compartmentalize. So they also, there's a very strong movement to help first responders process events that were very disturbing, like the death of a child. I'm on a team that gets called out when firefighters have had to go out on a call and a child dies, drowning or fireworks injury or some other kind of respiratory disease that they're not able to rescue. And to basically give them some support skills to understand that it's not weakness to be disturbed by that sense of helplessness and loss and horror.
Right.
And so we have to be patient with ourselves And the third gift is empathy.
Mhm.
And empathy is what you were talking about, before we started, about the sense of community and the sense of sharing and the sense of safety. I have run programs that usually run from 2 to 4 years after an event. I've just left a program, and I do have one program going now for long COVID patients,
Oh, that's
people who've been sick
incredible.
for 2 years,
Mm.
and like to keep that so that they know that they're not forgotten, and that even though there's still that there's a connection, that they have a connection, I have a connection to them and what they're going through,
Right.
even though it's been several years,
Mm.
because your life is damaged
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
certain ways.
Mm.
And even strong people, even people who are resilient, even people who kind of come back and they, put their life back together and they keep moving forward,
Mm.
whatever that means. They get a new home, they get a new job, they move to a new location, they repair their families. There's still we all have scar tissue, I guess, around those wounds, those
Absolutely.
emotional wounds.
Yeah.
And empathy is the gift that softens that scar tissue and, keeps us connected through our hearts to each other.
Yes, absolutely. And Dr. Laurie, I've always believed that the scars, the wounds that bleed the most are the ones that you can't see, right?
That's right.
And
Absolutely.
so
Yes.
I think, and how do you tie your fourth and fifth, your forgiveness and growth into this? How do you weave
Well,
that in?
forgiveness is really interesting because we think of forgiveness as a light switch. You either forgive or you don't. But forgiving, we need to step into a state of forgiving. And forgiving is an active state. It's like a spectrum or a dial. It's more of like an analog kind of state or a spectrum that can shift. So we can be forgiving of ourselves because we weren't able to prevent this from happening. We can be forgiving, and sometimes it's very hard to forgive, Mother Nature. Sometimes it's easier to have a villain. It's easier to be angry or to learn how to be forgiving towards a perpetrator in a way than it is something that's impersonal. So, for example, once again, with COVID, you have a pathogen that is it's anonymous, it's invisible, it's deadly, it's dangerous. It's still killing people, not as many, thank God, but it's still, it's a very dangerous little pathogen. And people have a need to personify that and to have a villain. And the villain may be, an authority figure. It may be, a scientist. It may be a politician. But it's kind of like human nature to want to blame somebody. It's very hard to. How can you forgive a bat? How can you forgive? How can you forgive a pathogen? So forgiving, and for people who are sick for a long time, usually after 6 months to a year, people start to ruminate on, well, if I only hadn't gone to the theater, if I hadn't gone to work that day. And so that becomes a process where we need to be forgiving of ourselves and be compassionate to ourselves for whatever it was that put us in that circumstance of proximity, so that we had the exposure in that moment. And this is something that I listen to people a lot, where this is a process that with the isolation of chronic illness, we tend to ruminate and go back to, what if I had done this, or I shouldn't have done that.
Would have, could have, yes.
Right, could have, should have, would have.
Yeah.
And so forgiving it helps to alleviate some of those, I guess, mental habits, if you will, habits of thinking that are not helpful for us. And then growth is when we can look back at the event, we can say, excuse me, I wish that had never happened to me, and I would never wish it on anybody else. But if it hadn't happened, I wouldn't have learned what I've learned, and I wouldn't be who I am today. And it's that gift of growth that we carry forward.
Beautiful.
And as I said,
Beautiful.
we never go back to who we were before, but growth is that moment when you have like this crystal clear moment of realization,
Yeah.
where you understand that that you have metabolized, you have integrated some of the teachings from that experience sufficiently,
Yeah.
so that you can say, I am more fully alive because of what
Wow.
I've experienced, although I wouldn't wish
Yeah.
it on anybody else.
The surrender, the
Yes,
resting,
that's right.
the pause, the resting space. Beautiful, beautiful. Starting from the humility, leading to patience, the empathy, the forgiveness, and finally the growth. That is so beautifully woven. It's almost what I think it was it Jackie Chan who said, he says, when life knocks you down, you can choose to get right up again, right? So, Dr. Laurie, I think life can be a boxing ring. And at the end, it boils down the choices, like you said. How do you rest with the fact that it happened and that you're not to blame? How do you forgive? So I think for success, joy, balance of mind, body, soul that you talk about so much, you talk about steadiness. In fact, before we go into the beautiful, funny, quirky part of this talk show, I just want to take a moment, Laurie. That's something that I really want our audience to hear from your mouth today. And I'm a curious cat always. You have talked about some keys to getting ready to stay steady. Now, what doors are you going to open with these keys? So tell us a little bit, very briefly, Dr. Laurie, what are these keys you talk about?
Well, I think, for each of these gifts, and in my book, for each chapter, we have keys to understanding, the essence of each chapter. And, there are certain things, especially some of them are very practical, like, having an emergency kit, having a list of emergency contacts, always have with you a pad and pencil or pen. I know this sounds very archaic, but in many emergencies, your cell phone reception and service will go down. You'll lose electricity.
Wow.
I know even after September 11th, all of the communications lines were out. Everything was disrupted for a while, in the immediate area. I was not directly affected at the time, but you have to be aware that you may have to write things down. Be prepared to take down the name and phone number of anyone you speak to, and also realize that you will have to make decisions, critical survival decisions, while you are in a state of shock. And so, as I said, always have an emergency kit available. Either have it in your car or in your home. Have an emergency plan that you can discuss, with your family or people that as to, what would you do.
Absolutely.
I used to keep, after September 11th, I used to keep a pair of sneakers or walking shoes in my office, with a change of clothes and an overnight kit. And I had a plan of how I would evacuate the city if there was another disaster.
Incredible.
And I knew where I would go, and my partner was going to come and meet me, pick me up at a certain place on the other side of a particular bridge, and we would speak about these things regularly, so that we knew, and we had like a mental map. So I would say that the main key to getting ready is to have a mental map. If we lose electricity, God forbid there's a fire, if you have an automobile, always have a first aid kit in your automobile, just in case.
Right.
It could be something minor. I mean, a child could cut a finger. I mean, it could be
Yeah.
something very,
Yeah.
very mild. But, those things are things that will give you a certain amount of peace of mind. And I
Amazing.
always suggest also carry some kind of a plastic bag that can seal, so
Mm.
that if there's a water emergency, you
Mm.
can put your writing, your writing pad and your notebook and your writing implements. You can put them or keep them in a plastic bag that seals, so
Mm.
you won't lose that information. So those
Yeah.
are things that you can do. And if you think that you're living in a place like you live where there are wildfires or
Mm-hmm.
flooding on a regular basis, I would say, have things in your emergency kit in
Mm.
addition to clothing and toothbrush, but things that will help you to stay calm.
Mm.
Some pictures that you can look at, or a book of, inspiration or something soothing, a
Amazing.
playlist of music,
Yep.
herbal tea or things that you like, or some chocolate or something that's just going to give you a little bit of comfort if you find that
Yeah.
you have to,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
if you lose your home. I mean, I was homeless.
Mm.
I mean, actually homeless for,
Mm.
about a month.
Wow. Mm.
I call myself a FEMA refugee, and I had everything that
That's
was left
hard.
in a
Mm.
suitcase.
Mm.
It was a large, very ugly suitcase. And
Mm.
I think I zigzagged around the country and went to my daughters and went to my brothers, and
Mm.
then, stayed with a friend until
Right.
we had power back
Mm.
on the island.
Mm.
And then I was able to go to a place that had been my mother's place. I was very lucky because many people were living in their cars. Many
Right.
people were flooded out. They were living in their cars. So,
Gosh.
and
Yeah.
we forget there were a million people affected,
Mm.
and it wasn't as dramatic. I mean, it wasn't category 5 like Hurricane Katrina. So we
Right.
don't remember those dramatic images of people
Mm.
on
Mm.
rooftops or people
Mm.
in a football stadium.
Right.
But there were a million people who basically lost
Yeah.
their homes
Yeah.
because of that storm. And
Right.
the experience of going from place to place, even
Yeah.
though I was with family and friends, and not having a home,
Yeah.
um, is something that, again, humility. I was very much aware. When we see pictures of Syrian refugees, or I'm
Yes.
sure you have refugee settlements in India,
Yeah.
where people have left everything
Mm-hmm.
behind,
Yes.
and it's just what you can carry on your back. We see the pictures of
Yeah.
Ukraine. It's heartbreaking.
Heartbreaking.
So,
And it's about
I
survival, right? Dr.
that's
Laurie, at
right.
that time, your physical uh, material goods do not matter. And you're just thinking, how can I keep my family safe? How can I be
Right.
safe? And it's like, a person complaining about a shoe and a sole that hurts and the blisters, till
Right.
you see another person with, one amputated leg. And then
Right.
you're thankful for those shoes. So
Right.
I think just if we can pause, like you said, just be in the moment and see what it's teaching you, and let our souls catch up with the mad paces. And I love your Brazilian prayer, which
Mm,
actually I wrote down. And I
mm,
actually have it written. And I
mm.
think I'm going to start including that, every day. I do in a certain different way. But this Brazilian prayer reminder, let there be peace in the
Peace in
ocean.
the ocean,
Let there
and
be
let there be
peace in
peace in
my
my soul.
soul.
Yes.
Isn't that beautiful? That's
Yeah.
where I think the resting
Mm,
space is. If you have peace here,
yes.
you retain your presence of mind,
Right.
and you imbibe and you absorb everything and anything that's happening to
Right.
you. And I think we take life for granted. So thank you so much for those keys for getting ready to stay steady, Dr. Laurie, because that is
Thank you.
so important. In fact, just a quirky little memory. We were going, I think there were about 10 couples, and we were going to the Maldives on a yacht. And this was my first time on a yacht, and this was about 2 years ago. For some crazy reason, I actually studied how to survive in a yacht. So I had a little Ziploc bag, and I
Yeah.
had I had a rope, and I had a little this, and I had a chocolate, and I was the butt of jokes. My friends were teasing me throughout. Oh, right, another morning, eventless, Minnku. Is your bag ready? And blah blah blah. But life is what it is, and we don't know from one moment to the other. So I think it is so important, and this is an appeal to all our listeners. Please look into life seriously, be ready, be aware, and that will carry you over versus not. So thank you, Dr. Laurie. And at that note, where can people find you? Because I'm sure a lot of our audience might want to get in touch with you. Where are you available?
Well, thank you. My website is laurienadel.com. And the website will be redesigned shortly, but you can contact me through my website would be the best way.
Wonderful.
There's a telephone number, and there's an email contact as well. So please feel free to reach out with any questions or anything that I could help you with. Appreciate your interest in my work, Minnku, so much, and thank you for your beautiful awareness and the soul that you bring out into the world, because it's so important in these times of turbulence.
Thank you so much for this heartful messages to our audience. We're not finished yet. We still have the rapid fire, the quirky, spontaneous answers, and it's fun. And you're in the driver's seat. Take it off wherever you would like to. So with your permission, should we start with the first one?
Of course.
Okay. So I wanted to actually ask you, what is the first thing you will stock up in preparation for emergency? The one thing, other than the gallons of water that you did in 2011, the one thing that you suggest?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear the question.
Okay.
Sorry.
What is the first thing you will stock up in preparation for an emergency, other than the gallons of water you did in 2011?
Oh, I would say peanut M&Ms.
Yeah. Okay. I grew up, and my dad was a pilot, and he used to have the Indian 5-star chocolate. So I grew up on that. So I totally understand.
Yes. Yeah. Those are great. Or some kind of chocolate. Is wonderful. I mean, it's a good, quick comfort food. It's also kind of fun, and you could always probably barter chocolate for water if you were in a pinch.
Okay. So if you could complete this statement for me. For you, faith is dash.
Faith is believing that the spirit world interpenetrates the physical world and communicates with us all the time.
Oh, I echo that so completely. I feel it right now. Dr. Laurie, if you could time travel, where would you like to go?
About 30 years into the future. I think that 30 years into the future is going to be a renaissance. I think there are going to be a lot of I guess wear and tear on the planet. There will be geographical shifts and catastrophic changes, and unfortunately, unfortunately, because there's going to be a lot of turmoil, but there are going to be huge shifts. And I think that there's going to be a rebirth of innovation and collaboration, because for the human species to evolve and survive, we have to evolve into a more empathic and intuitive species.
Absolutely.
So
I think, yeah, please.
I think 30 years in the future is going to be a very exciting time to be alive. Yes.
That is so interesting, because here in India as well, we believe we are in the Satyug, getting into the Satyug, which is the golden age. and the Kal Yug was the turmoil and the turbulence. So it's actually a beautiful time to be alive. So thank you so much, Dr. Laurie.
Thank you.
How was that for you? That was...
Oh, this was an amazing interview, and thank you so much. I cannot thank you so much for your interest in my work.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your unabashed modesty and absolute love for humanity. And thank you for the faith and trust you have placed in this vision of this talk show. So before we say bye to our wonderful, supportive, loving audience, I would like to close this episode today with a great takeaway from Vera Nazarian. And she says, if you're faced with a mountain, you can climb it, cross to the other side, you can go around it, you can dig under it, you can fly over it, you can blow it up, ignore it, and pretend it's not there, or turn around and go back the way you came, or you can stay on the mountain and make it your home. And you could embrace the 5 gifts from Dr. Laurie. That's my twist to that.
I love that. Thank you.
Join me.
Thank you so much.
Join me,
Right,
Dr. Laurie, to say bye to our global
Bye-bye.
audience. Bye-bye now. Please go and subscribe
you.
to the YouTube channel. Sending you all love, light, and joy. And I will see you in the next episode. So bye now.